This
picture
conference
fit
will now be recorded.
Yeah. Come again?
Ma'am, basically when we put a picture, when we insert a picture, right? So you've given us a code. I was able to insert a picture, but
Okay.
like my doubt was that sometimes the picture is really huge, so it takes almost the whole page. So is there a way to resize the picture?
Yes, there is a way to resize the picture. I'll also, let's say, show you how to search for images in Google right now. Okay.
Right, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. Thank you.
Fine. So all of you are able to see my screen, right?
Ma'am.
I've opened Google. You people are able to see that?
Ma'am.
Okay. Now go to open Google and search for free images download. Right?
Ma'am,
Yes.
I have doubt regarding Friday's session.
Okay.
When should
Okay.
I
Ask
ask?
me. You asked me what doubt you have. Let
Ma'am,
me
one
finish with the
second.
images. Let me finish with the images, then you ask me. Right now, whenever you are searching, you want to display a picture in your web page, search for free images. Go to Google, you click type free images download. Right now, most of the images which you see in the websites will be copyrighted. What do you mean by copyright? That means only the company has taken the copyright for that image. You are not supposed to use it. So search for free images. Free images can be used by anybody. You can be used by anyone, and you can even put it in a web page. They are freely available. Okay. Now let's say I want to download this image. Click on the image you want to download. Right? Then you can, let's say, all the similar images will be grouped together. Select the one you like to download. Right? Okay. Right click. Click on save image as. Right? Now when I click on save image as, the image I've selected will be saved in my computer, in my laptop. So you can select any folder you like. Okay, for example, I go to desktop. Okay, and let's say I have a folder called as outline. In that, let's say save as type JPG image. Don't make any changes. File name, you can give whatever name you want. I give the name as forest. Right? Fine. Now let's see how to display it in our web page. Fine. Now it has been saved in the folder outline. Okay. Now let me see. I open Notepad. Okay. So now I want to say display this image in my web page. Okay. What tag will be used is used to display images? What tag
IMG, SRC.
IMG, give a space SRC. Now, okay. And one more tip I want to give you. Let's say when you want to open an image, okay, whatever the image or video or anything, on Chrome, right? Let's say you can open a new tab, right? And then in that you can just drag and drop. Now what I do is I select this image, I drag and drop into the Chrome. Chrome will automatically display. Yes. So from the address bar, I can, let's say, copy and paste the image. Is it clear, everyone? See, if you go and type the name of the image, you may make some mistake. If you make a mistake, right, it will not be displayed properly. So first you open the image in Chrome. Yes.
Black color.
I'm not able to hear you properly. Image.html. Okay. Now I open this image.html. Right? Okay. So what you wanted to do was how to resize.
15 मिनिट मध्ये जायचं आहे. थांब ना. इतकं ग्रँड.
Okay. Now I'll show you how to resize and display it. There is an attribute called as width. I say 50 is equal to 50. Okay, 50 pixels, 50 by 50. So using this width and height attributes, you can display the image in any size you like. Is it clear?
Ma'am, got it. Thank you so much.
Anji, I think you have to mute yourself.
दुसऱ्या कंपनीमध्ये नाही देणार का?
Hello? Excuse me.
Don't go look out for now. Market is really bad. Just anything I'll go out and all that. First another 5 years don't tell them.
Excuse me. Write down.
चालती हो. हा निघायचं नंतर. हो तेच. कोण आहे तू? म्हणा नाही ते. ते कोण आहे? हा बच्चे. हा सगळं संपवलं तुम्ही? काय संपवलं? जेवली पण नाही दुपारी. मी कालचं थोडा भात मी गवते कसं ठेवलेलं ना. कशाला? तेच खाल्लं. कशाला? 5 o'clock. बरंच ते खाल्लं. ते पोट थोडं खराब म्हणून खाल्लं. चिकन तसंच आहे. दोन्ही भाजलं आणि अर्ध मी कुठून ऑर्डर केलं? हा मी तुला मी शॉर्ट घेते मग.
Okay, has everyone completed writing?
म्हणजे ते डाव बघायचं म्हणून घालतो.
Excuse me. Has everybody finished writing it?
Yes, ma'am, done.
Yes, ma'am. Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Happy Teacher's Day.
Okay. Right. Can we move on to the next topic?
Ma'am.
Okay. Any other doubts? Any other doubts? Okay. Let me move on to the next topic. So today we are going to start with CSS. Okay. So HTML is
Ma'am,
basically, yes.
I have doubt regarding pre-formatted text.
Okay.
Can you show
It's,
it in the...
no, pre-formatted text, however you type it in the source code, the same way it will appear. If you give 10 spaces in the beginning, all the 10 spaces, it will be, the text will be displayed after the 10 spaces. Okay, you try it out. Right? Okay, so we'll start with cascading style sheet. So HTML is basically used to describe the structure of a web page. So what I mean by structure, that is what should appear where. Let's say while designing, I say I'll give a heading to the web page. Okay, the heading I want it to be displayed in the center. Then a paragraph, let's say 2 paragraphs, hyperlink. Then what some images. Okay, then tables, list, so many things. So these are the structural elements which appear on the web page, and HTML is used for that. Then CSS is used to specify how the HTML should be presented. Now what I mean by, let's say, presented, let's say I want to display the heading with a H1 tag. I want it to be displayed in the center in the red color. Okay, with let's say I want to set some margins, border, all that I specify using CSS. CSS stands for cascading style sheet. Okay, cascading means what? Cascading means, let's say I can make CSS, I can link one CSS file to multiple HTML pages. Let's say when I have 100 HTML pages in my website, I can create one CSS file and I can link it to all the 100 pages. So by changing the one CSS file, I can let's say change the look and feel of 100 different documents. And JavaScript is used to define the behavior. What I mean by behavior, I have, let's say I have a button in my web page. Whenever you click on the button, I want to display a welcome message. Welcome to my website. I can write the code using JavaScript. So JavaScript defines the behavior. Like when you click on a checkbox, what happens? Let's say I display a form, a data entry form. When you fill up the data entry form, what happens? So all that is done using JavaScript. And CSS is concerned with presentation. That is how to present the HTML elements. Okay, so that it looks pleasing on the eye. So HTML is concerned only with the content. Okay, fine. Now, when you download a HTML page, okay, so what the browser does is it look whether you've linked any CSS to the HTML page. My HTML page till now we have seen only HTML code. So I can write a style sheet definition in the head tag using the, let's say, style tag, and I can write my JavaScript code. So if I have written all this stuff, the HTML parser will load this code. So it will format my HTML page according to the CSS rules I have specified. And whenever I've defined any behavior, let's say using JavaScript, I can say as soon as a web page is loaded on the browser, display a welcome message. So that also it will activate. Then I can say when the user clicks on the submit button, okay, present this to the server side. All that behavior I can describe using JavaScript. So basically, when you load a HTML page, the HTML page will contain not only HTML, it might contain CSS, it will contain JavaScript. So the HTML parser will load all this, it will parse all this content, and accordingly the HTML will be displayed. So whenever you activate any event, like clicking on a button, or let's say filling up a form, that if I've written any JavaScript code to respond to that event, when the button is clicked, or when let's say there are 10 checkboxes, I've selected a checkbox, all that behavior I'll be writing the code in the head section. So the HTML parser will automatically execute that code. So there is the event will be reported to the JavaScript, and the JavaScript code you have written to respond to that event will be executed, and all the presentation will be decided by CSS. So your user interaction might control layout. I can combine the behavior plus presentation together. For example, in using JavaScript, I can put two different buttons. I can say if you click on one button, I'll display the background color as blue. You click on another button, I can change the background color to green. So in this case, both the CSS and the JavaScript are bundled together to define your HTML. So the browser will automatically check the CSS code you have written and the JavaScript code you have written, and based on this code, the HTML will be displayed. And whenever any event is reported, JavaScript will be automatically activated. Okay, so this is how the CSS basically works. Whenever you load the HTML, the parser will load the CSS file, parse all the CSS rules. So basically in CSS, what I do is I can specify the rules. What I mean by rule is H1. Whenever the heading tag appears, H1 tag appears, display it in red color. And whenever a paragraph tag appears, put a border around it. Like this, I can specify a rule for every HTML element. Okay, so the parser will create a DOM tree. DOM stands for Document Object Model. The document object model will contain all the HTML elements, starting with HTML as a root element. So now when I have a paragraph tag in my HTML page, fine, that will be present in the DOM tree. Let's say I've given a style for that paragraph element. Okay, so that paragraph will be styled according to the style sheet rules I've given. Then everything will be displayed. So before your web page is displayed on the browser, okay, the HTML parser will perform all these operations: loading the CSS, parsing the CSS, creating the DOM tree, then formatting your web page according to the CSS. Then only it will be displayed. So using CSS, I can completely control the presentation aspect of the web page. So let's say using HTML, for example, I can display a list. Okay, then I can say how the list should be formatted. What should be the color of the bullet? What should be the color of the text? All that I'll be specifying using cascading style sheet. So then let's say why we should use CSS. So the advantages of CSS is that, okay, the CSS will give you the uniform look and feel across different devices. Now when I have a website, I can open it in my laptop, I can also open it in my mobile phone, I can open it in my tab, and I can open it in a variety of devices. CSS ensures that in whichever device you open your web page, they have the same look and feel. Then cross-platform. Now let's say when I not only devices, now you can browse the website from your Android phone, from your iPhone, let's say from the Windows laptop, Mac laptop, okay, or Google Chrome, from different operating systems, let's say I can even browse the website from the Linux machine, right? So the CSS ensures the same, okay, presentation rules will be applied depending on different devices across different platforms. Okay, you can define animation with CSS, and CSS gives you advanced UI components. What do I mean by advanced UI components? I can let's say specify a customized combo box. Okay, a combo box means, let's say I want to present a set of options to the user in a list. I can define a customized list, let's say in CSS. Then depending on the location, you can give the different support, like you can display the same web page in different languages. Then video and audio support, everything is provided by CSS. So the latest version of CSS is CSS 3. Okay, CSS 1 was let's say released in 1996. Then CSS 3 is the version which we'll be working on, and CSS 4 is exclusively defined for your mobiles and other devices. Okay, so we'll be learning CSS 3. So advantage is CSS saves time. What I'll show you when I do let's say start with the programming, you'll clearly understand how it saves time. So what I can do is, let's say when you have the H1 tag in 10 different web pages, you want to display it with the same style. Let's say display it with a border. Now in CSS, I can define a rule. I can let's say make that CSS rule applicable to all the 10 pages, and pages will load faster. So when you link it to a CSS file, okay, and all the HTML files are linked to the same CSS, okay, the page formatting and everything will be faster for the browser, and it is easy to maintain. And more than HTML, you can define lot of options are available for styling the web page, and multiple device compatibility, and let's say it follows the global web standards. When you follow the global web standards, okay, so in the users will be able to browse and see your web page in all types of devices. Then platform independence. There is platform independence means you browse it from any operating system, any device, okay, anywhere. The web page will have the same look and feel. Okay, fine. Now CSS reduces the workload for the designer. Okay, now let's say instead of defining the styles in hundreds of pages, I can define in one style sheet file. Then the page download size will be minimized. So remember, HTML is used for content and CSS is used for presentation. Right. Now, when I want to specify a CSS style sheet for my web page, I have three different options. One is the inline CSS, internal or embedded CSS, and external CSS. So the most preferred method is external CSS. In that, what I do is I specify all the styles in a separate file, and I save it with the extension CSS, and I can link it to any number of HTML pages. Okay, we look at it one by one. Now CSS inline style. So basically, when I say style sheet, a style sheet will consist of, let's say, a rule. So what do you mean by the rule? The rule consists of two parts. First, you specify the property, you give the colon, and then you specify the value you want to assign to the property. In HTML, you have seen attributes, right? Attributes and values. So for a tag, you define an attribute, you assign a value to the attribute. In CSS, what we do is, okay, fine. So we define all the styling, let's say, properties with the CSS rules. Now, CSS rule will consist of two parts, selector and the declaration. Now, when I say selector can be any HTML tag. Like I can say selector can be H1, H2, and then paragraph, right? Then it can be body. Anything you specify within the body tag can be used as a selector. And then declaration. The declaration, you specify a property and separated by a colon, specify the value for the property. When you're specifying multiple properties, you can include it within the curly braces. And to separate one property value pair from the other, you end it with a semicolon. Like for the body, when I want to specify 4 different properties. So body, that is the selector. Selector will always be a HTML tag, remember. And then in the declaration block, so I want to specify the font family and I want to give 3 different choices. So okay, the font family property I've given, then end it with a semicolon. You can come and specify the next property. So for a single selector, you can specify any number, let's say 10, 15, any number of properties. Once you have given all the properties, okay, you can close the tag, indicating the end of the style sheet rule. So you can consider this as a property value pair. When you compare it with the HTML, you can say your property can be thought of as an attribute. So value can be the value that is assigned to the attribute. Clear? Fine. Now we'll see how to specify using inline style. Okay, what I mean by inline style is that whenever you want to specify the style sheet rule for a particular element in HTML, so you specify directly using the style attribute. You give the set of all the property value pairs. Okay, I mean your HTML allows you to do this. This is called as an inline style, but you're advised not to use it. It has got lot of disadvantages with this approach. We'll see what is a disadvantage one by one. So first I'll give you a basic example for the inline style, right? And one more thing you need to learn, the important thing is you can specify comments in HTML starting with this angular bracket, exclamation, 2 hyphens, close it with 2 hyphens and then the closing tag. I mean, what is the use of the comment? Let's say I'm designing a web page and I want to give some description about my web page design to anyone who wants to look at that, who is looking at the source code. So I can give a comment. The comments will not be displayed in the browser. Now, for example, I'll double click and open it in the Chrome. You see, the comment I have given will not be displayed. Comment is just for your reference. Now, when let's say you design some complicated website, you want to store some notes, you can, let's say, give a comment. So comment is a brief description about the web page, which you're giving it for your reference. The comments will not be displayed in the browser, right? Okay. Now let us look. So how many tags I have in this HTML file? Tell me. How many tags within the body? How many tags do I have?
Ma'am, you have the heading tag, the
I have the heading tag.
You have the underline tag,
Yes.
paragraph tag.
Yes. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to specify a style. Let's say the text alignment, font size for the above elements using inline style. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to specify a style for my H1, right? Heading H2 and then the paragraph, right? So don't write anything right now. Once I complete, okay, you'll be able to write. I'll give you time for writing. So style is equal to. So what is specified is set the text alignment. Let's say this is the heading. I want it to be displayed in the center of the web page, right? Okay. So I say text align. So this is one property. The next property is I want to specify I have to specify the font size. So I say font size. Okay, since this is the heading, I say 24 points. It can be specified in points or in pixels. Then font family. Font family, I say Arial. Fine. Okay. Text color. Let's say I want the heading to be displayed in red color. Color. Fine. I've given the inline style. Let me refresh the page. Okay, I haven't closed the quote. Right? Okay. Now let me reload it. See, for H1, I've given all this. What are the styles I've given? Text align, center. Right? Okay. Then font size 24. Font family Arial, color red. So all the style properties I've given is applied to this H1. Clear? So this I'm doing it with an inline style. When I say inline style, what I mean is when I'm styling the HTML element by just using the style attribute, I directly specify all the style sheet property values using the style attribute. Right? In the same way, I can specify a rule for my, let's say this H2. So for H2 also, I specify a style sheet rule. Text align center, font size, I give 20 pixel. Font family, I say Tahoma. Color instead of red, I say blue. Fine. Now I come and refresh the page. You see, the style attributes I have given is applied to H2. Then for the paragraph. Fine. For the paragraph, I will specify a different set of attributes. Text align. Now here I say left. I don't want the center alignment. Font size, I say 14 pixels. Font family. Okay, let it be Tahoma. Color, I say green. Fine. Is it clear? This is what is inline style. So in the inline style, you will be specifying each and every element. You will be specifying it with a style attribute. So what will be the disadvantage of the inline style? Can you people guess? What is the disadvantage of this approach? Now suppose, let's say I'm using H1 tag again, right, to specify some text. I want the same style. What I need to do, I need to write it once again, right? When I'm using, let's say 10, the H1 tag, the paragraph tag 10 times, I have 10 paragraphs in my web page, and I want the same style to be applied. So wherever I give the paragraph tag, I need to specify this, right? That will be, let's say, too, cumbersome and boring. And another disadvantage is tomorrow, instead of 14 pixel, I decide to change the font size to 16 pixel. So if you have 10 paragraphs, you have to go and modify all the 10 paragraphs, right? This is the disadvantage of the inline style. So you are not supposed to use inline style at all. Is it clear to everyone? Clear? Okay, write down. So write down carefully. See, the moment you miss any this code, it will not be displayed at all. So you have, let's say, this property value. Each and every property value will be separated from the other with a semicolon, right? And font and family is separated by a hyphen. Similarly, text alignment. Fine. Okay, let us move on to the next one. So inline style is one way of specifying the styles in the web page. Okay. The next one is the embedded style. So this is the inline style. Next we'll see. So you're not supposed to use the inline style at all, remember. Then embedded style. In the embedded CSS, you specify all the style sheet elements using the style tag under the head section. So you open the style tag, you specify for each and every element, you can specify a style, and then you have to close the style tag. So here for H1 paragraph, so every element I can specify a style. Why it is called as embedded? Because the style sheet rules are embedded in the same HTML page where you have the content. So the content and presentation are embedded in the same HTML file. That is why it is called as the embedded CSS. Right? Now let us look at an example for the embedded CSS. Fine. Now here I have, let's say this H1, H2 paragraph, everything. Now I'm going to specify the style within the style tag. Okay. Now what I do is H1. Specify the selector. H1 is the selector. Then what I do is I specify the style sheet rule. H1. So let's say what I want to specify, let's say text alignment. You can also specify all the style sheet rules in the same line, but to make things more clearer, you can specify in different lines also. Okay, so you need to specify the, you're supposed to apply text alignment, font size, family, color, everything. So now I say color. Font family, I can give a series of fonts together. Now I say Arial, Tahoma. So what I mean by this, let's say my first choice for displaying this H1 tag will be Arial. In case the Arial font is not available in the computer, then the browser will display it in Tahoma. So like this, you can give a set of choices. Font size. I'll say 24 font. Right? Okay. Now let us look at the browser. Now you see, since I've let's say specified a style sheet rule for this H1, wherever I've used the H1 tag, the style is applied. I've used the H1 tag twice in my web page, so all these two texts are displayed according to the style sheet rule. Right? Text line. Reload. Okay, fine. Now let me define another style for H2 and the paragraph using this embedded style. Then let's say I have H2. So I'm going to specify all the styles in a single line. Then so you can specify everything in a single line itself. Right? Okay, fine. Then for the paragraph, I specify a simple rule. And I can even give these two braces in a single line. Okay, now I say so clear to everyone? You see, now this font, I mean Arial, and then font size is 14 points. So now when you look at the advantage of the embedded style, what is the advantage? I've specified a style for the H1 tag. I've used the H1 tag twice. So I don't have to keep on redefining it again and again. The same style will be applied wherever the H1 tag appears in my web page. The style will be applied. So that is the advantage of the embedded style sheet over the inline style. Okay, fine. Okay, right now. I'll just give you, let's say, 2 minutes for writing.
Excuse me, ma'am, I have a doubt.
Yes?
Ma'am, so for inline CSS, you can, so suppose there is already properties for H1.
Yes.
There cannot be another H1, right? With different properties.
No, no, there is a way to do it. Suppose for two different heading, for a single tag, I want to specify different properties. We'll see how to do it. Let's say, next. That can
Okay,
also
but
be done using something called as classes. Okay, so this is a we are learning the very basic rules. Next, we'll come to the advanced portions one by one.
okay, but in embedded, you can give multiple properties.
You can give in embedded and external style sheet. You can give.
Oh,
If you can't
thank you,
give,
ma'am.
nobody will use CSS.
Correct. Yeah.
You can give. I'll scroll down now. Finished? Okay. We'll go to the next. Okay, now first we saw, let's say, how to specify the style with inline style, inline. We also saw what is the disadvantage with that. Now in the embedded, let's say CSS, we have understood that embedded CSS is more powerful than inline style. Then you have, let's say, the ultimate, okay, powerful way to specify the style sheet rule is using the external style sheet. Okay, fine. In the external style sheet, what you do is you specify all the style sheet rules not in the style tabs in a separate file, and you need to save it with the extension CSS. This is very, very important. Note down. So I can and in the CSS file, you're supposed to specify only the CSS rules. No HTML tag must be given. That is, in the sense, you should not give the HTML head or this thing. You just have to give the selector declaration. That's it. So all the style sheet rules, you specify it in a separate file, save it with the extension CSS. Then you link your HTML document to that style sheet file using the link tag. So in the head section, instead of giving the style tag and giving the styles, you give the link tag. Rel is equal to style sheet, type text CSS, href is your CSS file name you need to give. So all the CSS rules you have specified in the CSS file will be applied to the HTML document. Now, why I say this is the ultimate powerful way? Because one style sheet file can be linked to multiple HTML documents. So as I told you before, if I have 50 web pages in my website, I don't write 50 CSS files. I write only a single CSS file. I link that CSS to all the 50 documents. Now here in the CSS file, I specify the style for every element in every web page. Let's say your body, your header, H1, right? H2, H3, and so on. So when I say H1, when I say background color green, color red, so in all the pages, the same style will be applied. Now tomorrow, I decide to change the heading color from green to blue. I don't have to go and make the change in all the 50 HTML files. I just have to make the change in the single style sheet file. It will be reflected in all the HTML documents, right? So one style sheet file can be linked to thousands of HTML documents. So the style sheet file will be controlling the design of the presentation of all the HTML pages, right? And the important thing you need to remember is that you need to give the link tag and link your HTML to the style sheet, right? Let's see an example for this. Now I've already written, let's say this program that I've given the link tag style sheet. So I have my style.css in the same folder, right? So my style.css contains the style sheet rules. So body, I've given the background color as, okay, background color, color blue, font size. Now what I've done is I've linked it to this HTML document, what? External style sheet. Now let us open this HTML document in the browser. You see, the style sheet rule I've given in the CSS is applied here. So instead of color blue for the body, I give it as, let's say, red, say green. Right? The green color is applied. Now what I'll do is I'll create one more HTML file, right? External style sheet 2.html, right? So then what I do is fine. Now I open this one, external style sheet 2 in the browser. Okay, right? Now I go and make a change in the mystyle.css. Background color, instead of peach puff, I give it as cyan, a shade of blue. Now what I do is I reload the pages. You see, style is applied to both the HTML. Clear? This is the power of the external style sheet. A single style sheet can be linked to thousands of HTML documents, and by using a single style sheet, you can control the appearance of thousands of HTML documents. Right? Okay. Right up. Fine, I'll open the style sheet file now. Note down. And remember, the style sheet file must be stored with the extension CSS. Otherwise, this will not work. So keep it in mind. And they should contain only the style sheet rules, not any of the HTML tags. Head and body, nothing should be given. Okay, fine. Let's move on to the next topic. Paragraph. Okay, fine. So till now we have looked at how to specify, let's say, a style sheet rule, how to specify multiple rules for a single element by separating each property value pair with a semicolon. I think this much everyone would have understood. Okay, fine. Then multiple properties using this curly braces. Okay, now the let's say property that will be very frequently used for text is the background color, text color, family, font family, size, text alignment and margin. Okay, now let's say we look at, let's say, the different types of selectors. So till now what we have done is, let's say we have specified the selector, the HTML tag. We have given the rule that is called as an element selector. So in the element selector, you directly give the HTML element and you write the series of rules for that. Then there is another type of selector called as the ID selector. So IDs are preceded with a hash ID name and then you give a set of style sheet rules. So the advantage of ID selector is that, okay, this ID selector rules can be applied to any selector, but in one web page there will be only one ID. Then I have the class selector. So dot, I give the class names are preceded by a dot. Okay, now dot main is a class. I can define one more class called as dot red, dot blue, like that. Now, whenever I want these rules to be applied to an element, what I do is I say paragraph class is equal to main. The rules will be automatically applied to the paragraph. Then H1 class is equal to main. So whatever rules are given in the class will be applied to the element. Then there is one more, let's say, selector called as a universal selector. This must be used very carefully, which lets you select all the tags within a particular division. Now when I say body star, okay, this will be applied to every element in the web page. Right? So using this selector, let's say element selector is the most basic selector which we have learned till now. So using ID, classes and universal selector, okay, you can apply one style sheet rule to a series of tags. We'll see that example for each now. Okay, now let's come to the class selector. Okay. So class name should always begin with a dot and then the name, you give the rule. Wherever you want the rule to be applied, in the HTML tag, you give the class attribute and give the name of the class, right? Then there is one more powerful concept called as a combining selectors. What I mean by combining selector is that let's say I want the same style sheet rule to be applied to H1 and H2, right? So what I can do is I can combine the instead of giving H1, specifying the style sheet rule, then typing H2, defining the same thing. I can combine these two selectors together. So how do I combine the selectors? I say H1, comma H2. That means the style sheet rule I'm going to specify now will be applied to both H1 and H2. Fine. So now here I say fine. So this is called as combining selectors. Let us open the web page and see. See, the same style sheet rule is applied to both the selectors. Clear? So I can give a H1, comma H2, comma H3. I can combine any number of selector, separate each selector, let's say with a comma, right? Now, if I change the style sheet rule now, all the selectors will be updated automatically. Right? Right up. Fine. We'll move to the next topic now. Okay, you asked me the doubt, no, how to apply different styles to the same, okay, HTML tag. You can do it using classes. Let's say for a first paragraph, let's say for paragraph tag, I'll define two different styles, right? So what I can do is, I can say, so along with the class name, I can also specify the selector. Now I say p.red. So I say color red, font family, right? Now I write one more class. Color blue, font family, I'll give a different font. 14 point. Now I've defined two different styles using two different classes for a single selector, that is paragraph. Now for the first paragraph, what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the first class. So I say class is equal to red, right? And for the second paragraph, I say class is equal to blue. So here the name of the class is red and blue. So this is the class name begins with dot. I've also given a selector since I want these two classes to be applicable to the same element. Okay, fine. We'll go to the class selector. Right? Now you see for the first paragraph, I've given the class name as red. So that is displayed in red color, Arial font. For the second paragraph, what I've given the class name as blue. Okay. So the rule I've given the class blue is applied. Third paragraph, I have not given any rule. So it is displayed in the default style. Clear? So if I have, let's say, and I can also give the alignment. So here, for example, let's say I give the text align attribute. Text align, I say right. So this is aligned to the right margin of the web page. Right? So if I have 10 different paragraphs, I want to give 10 different styles. All I need to do is 10 different classes I can give. But the thing you need to remember is that the red and blue can be applied only for the paragraph tag, not for other tags. Because specifically I have said p dot red. So this is applicable only for the paragraph. Clear? Right now. Radon, I'll give you 2 minutes to write. Over. Okay. So the next we'll see how to define a class that can be used for different selectors. Okay. Now I'll apply the same style sheet rule to these two tags H1 and T. Right. Where is it? 1 pixel. It's a 4 pixel. Fine. So here what is I have given, I have written a class, but I am not, let's say, bound it to any selector, right? So these are called as anonymous classes. Anonymous class means the class that is not specific to any particular selector. So I can apply this class to any tag I like within the web page. So I've given the font size, the text color, and then the border. So the border, there's a shorthand way of specifying the border. The thickness of the border, dotted or solid. You can give dotted, solid, dashed, any number of, let's say, attributes, and then the border color. So if I want a solid border, I say solid. Clear? So you can, let's say, make a class specific to a particular element, or you can write a general class and you can use it for all the different elements. Right now. Over. Okay, we'll go to the next topic. So we have seen, let's say, the class selector. Class names always start with a dot. Okay, so wherever you want the style to be applied, you need to give the class attribute to the tag and specify the class name within double quotes. Remember, if you give it out without the double quotes, it may not work in some browsers, right? So always the class name must be given within the double quotes. Fine. Next, you have something called as a contextual selector. Contextual selectors are very, very powerful. That is, you have something called as a parent element and then the child element. See, here I have given the paragraph and then EM, the emphasized text. Now, I want to apply a style for the EM tag. So normally, how do you do it? How do you do it? Tell me. In the style tag, you give EM, you give the style name, right? Now, I don't want it to that way. I want to define a style only for the EM elements that are present within the paragraph. So, this is the parent element paragraph. This is the child element EM. Okay, so I specify a style sheet rule for the child element. So I've given paragraph space EM. Remember, the style is applicable only for EM, not to the paragraph. You give color, yellow background, anything you want. So this text color property is applicable only for the EM element if it is contained within the paragraph. So if my EM is not present within the paragraph, let's say the text, the style will not be applied. That is why it is called as a contextual selector. Contextual selector means you're defining a style rule for a child element in the context only when it is contained within a particular parent element. So the style will be applied only to the element if it is contained within the parent container. If it is contained in a different container, the style will not be applied. So this is the contextual selector. So this will be very, very helpful to us. Where it will be helpful, I tell you. Suppose, let's say, when you're defining a HTML table, that we'll be discussing it in the next class. And I want, let's say, style to be applied only to an element if it is contained within TH tag or TR. Then specifically, I can apply the rule. Okay, so let us look at the contextual selector now. Now, let's say I want to define, let's say, style for the bold tag. Okay, so now here what I do is I say H1B. Now I define another rule for B. It is contained within a paragraph. Color I say blue. Right? You see, if you compare Okay, now I've defined a two style sheet rules for the bold tag. First one, what I've given is, so if the bold tag appears within the H1, apply this rule color red. Now here you see the first, let's say line, the bold tag appears within H1. So wherever the bold tag appears within H1, it is displayed in red color. Then another rule I have given is the bold tag appears within a paragraph. Display it in blue with a light green background. Here, this rule is applied. And in the third line, the B tag doesn't appear in any of the context. So none of these two styles are applied. Clear? So the first rule is applied only when B appears in the context of H1. Second rule is applied only when B appears in the context of paragraph. Clear to everyone? I hope it's clear. Okay, right now. So you can consider this H1 and B as the parent container and the parent element and the child element, or you can think of it as a outer selector and inner selector. When you're designing a layout of a HTML page, so you need to be thorough with all this concept. How to select based on a selector, how to define rules based on the class, based on the ID, based on the selectors. These things you need to know very thoroughly. Over. Right. Okay, now ID select or ID will begin with a hashtag. So we know already saw, right? Classes will begin with a dot, ID will always begin with a hashtag. So you can give the hashtag ID name. You can specify a set of rules, right? Okay, now whenever you want the style related to the ID to be applied, so with the tag, you give the ID attribute and specify the ID name. But the very important thing you need to remember is that there can be only once the ID should be given. Okay, you can apply the ID to any HTML element in a web page. Okay, but you're supposed to give it only once. So where you have to use this ID, let's say like let's say a bold tag appears in a web page in a lot of places, and you're given a particular style. Only in the heading you want to give a different style, so you can define an ID and then give the ID to the bold tag, right? And when you compare the ID selector and the class selector, so the classes can be used multiple times, can be used any number of times in a web page, okay, but the ID should be used only once. But I mean, if you go and try it, if you give the same ID to 3-4 elements, the same style will be applied. But don't ask me why you have said you should not give, but I have given, it is working, it will work. But if you are accessing this ID element in the JavaScript and you're making some changes, it will be applied only to the first ID, not to the other IDs. Clear? So the classes can be used multiple times in a web page, any number of times in a web page, but the ID should be used only once. The ID should be unique. So ID is used as a unique element, remember. So let us see example for the ID selector. Page text. Okay. Now, till now you would have observed I have never used double quotes for the font name, right? Now, I have enclosed this font name within double quotes. Why? Because whenever your font name or any attribute name includes spaces, it must be declared within double quotes. Clear? So here I have given page heading. Okay. I am applying this Comic Sans. So I've defined it using the ID, and for the H2 tag, I've given this ID and the style is applied to the H2 tag. Okay. Now, if clear? Okay. Right now. Page text. No, page text is a class. It starts with dot, right? That's why I was applied it with a class. So you can define another paragraph and apply this page text. But that cannot be done with a page heading because it is an ID. Over. Okay, next we'll go to the universal selector. And universal selector is very powerful. It lets you select even all the elements in the same page. So that has to be used very carefully. Okay. Now when you use this inline styling, that is very specific. ID is also specific. You don't have to memorize the class name. Here you're designing it basically, right? Class name is something which you give. See, I can call it as page text. Okay, I mean I can call it by any name I like. So you don't have to memorize, right? See. Say for example, okay, so P dot red, I've given the class name. Red is the name I've given. I can even, let's say, call it as my red. So, and then wherever I want the style to be applied, you have to say my red. That's all. Okay, this is user defined name. You can give whatever name you like. Clear? So, and when you're giving it, you give it a meaningful name so that next time when you read, you should be able to understand what you have written, and anybody else who is reading that should be able to understand what exactly it represents. Right? Only thing you need to be careful is that give a meaningful name to the classes. Class name is something which you give, no need to memorize. Okay, next we'll come to the universal selector. Now here I say body. Now you see The universal, see, star represents your universal selector. That means every element within the body tag will be selected and the style will be applied. See, it is applied the style for H1, H2 paragraph. Everything which is contained within this body will be selected and the style will be applied. Clear? Okay. Write down. And you have to be very, very careful. See, if you don't use it wisely, it might have some unintended effects. So you have to be very careful while using this tag, because it will select all the child elements of the container element and apply the style. Okay. Right. So generally, we'll avoid using the universal selector because it is very too general. Over. Okay, we'll stop with this today and then go through all the code ones, all the programs you have written, and if you have any doubts, you can ask me tomorrow, right?
Ma'am.
Okay, fine. Go home and relax. Have a nice sleep.
Thank you so much.
ma'am.
Okay.